Hello, this is the first in a series of video blogs about the wonderful gardens here at Blakesley Hall. Since 2002 we've been developing these gardens as an extension of the interpretation of the Tudor Hall. We have a kitchen garden where I am now. Here they would have grown a range of useful plants for use in the hall, such as mint, which was a good cure for stomach complaints, marigold, which was used for lightening the hair, and sage, which is said to be a cure for baldness. We also have a beautiful flower border. We have an extensive range of fruit trees and fruiting plants, and we also have wide lawns where we do a huge number of events every year. Please listen further to find out more about lavender, which is really at its best at this time of year, and listen on later in the year to find out more about apples and Christmas.
Merry lads are gay, fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la. Now is the month of May, when merry lads are gay, fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la.
Welcome to Blakesley Hall. Please follow me inside. It is often thought that the Tudors were a very smelly bunch of people. They certainly did not care for washing, and they certainly weren't bothered by bad smells. However, this is far from the truth. They were very concerned with how they smelt personally, and also how their home smelt. And a lot of time and effort was spent in masking these smells. Now, for most people during the Tudor period, a daily bath would not have been possible. It would have been very inconvenient and also very time consuming. However, what we do know is that they would have actually had a daily wash using water in a bowl just like this. In household manuals of the day, they give an abundance of recipes for something called washing waters. Now, washing waters was simply water put into a bowl with herbs such as lavender added to it, and the idea was that the herbs would make the water very fragrant and make the person smell very nice. Now, this was incredibly important for the less well-off in society because they used soap that was made of animal fat or tallow, and if you imagine, really not very pleasant smelling, so the water with the herbs in would have counteracted this. It also became very popular for people to wear perfume. Originally, this was thought to again mask the odour coming from a person. However, what they now think is that it was used as a status symbol, and this is because the spices and the herbs used to make perfume had to be imported from foreign countries. Now, to import something cost a lot of money, so in order to do that, you had to be very wealthy indeed. So if you could afford to import these spices and wear perfume, people knew that you were very rich. However, what did become very popular and a lot cheaper during the 15th and 16th century was the idea of wearing a Tussie-mussie. Now, a Tussie-mussie is a small, sweet-smelling bouquet that the ladies and gentlemen would have worn upon their clothing. And it was very easy to make and also a lot cheaper than perfume. You at home can also make one. All you need is one sweet-smelling flower. Here I have a rose, surrounded with sprigs of lavender or other beautiful smelling herbs, and they would have tied a ribbon around the bottom of it like so, and then attached this to their clothing, and this would have ensured that they constantly had a nice fragrant smell coming from this Tussie-mussie. Now, we know that the Tudors spent a lot of time trying to make their person smell as lovely as possible, but they also spent a lot of time trying to make their home equally as fragrant. Now, here in the Great Hall, the floor is not original. The floor would have been about a foot lower when the house was first built, and it would have been made of ox blood, dung and soil. So as you can imagine, really quite whiffy. Now, the servants would have tried to cover this smell up as much as possible, particularly if the family had guests, and what they would have done is they would have laid some rushes along the floor. On top of this, they would have laid herbs like lavender. Now, the idea was that when these herbs were walked on and crushed underfoot, they would have released a very sweet-smelling fragrance, thus masking the smell of the floor. Another useful thing that they did was to create lavender bags. Now, they would have made these using a small piece of fabric like so. They would have put the lavender inside, tied them up, attached a ribbon, and then hung them in the rooms of the house. Now, we know this worked because there is text that says so. One such verse says, "Hung up in houses doth very well a temper, to cool and make fresh the place to the comfort and pleasure of those therein. So obviously, lavender bags did work. Lavender was also cited as an excellent deterrent for pests. For some reason, they thought that pests were put off by lavender. So because of this, lavender sprigs were put in mattress to deter vermin, and also lavender sprigs were put into clothes chests. Now this had two benefits. Firstly, it meant that moths were deterred from eating the clothes, which would be very important, particularly if the family were wealthy and therefore had fine silks and velvets. And secondly, it also meant that when they did want to use them, they already smelt very sweetly of lavender rather than a musty kind of clothes storage smell. I really hope this video has shown you some of the ways in which lavender was used inside the Tudor home.
La 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 la.